the last time I did an update, I was talking about how I was hoping the next day would go well because it was a pretty ambitious day. One pickup, actually two pickups. Then I had to drive over to Richmond, Virginia and do a drop off and then pick up again and head towards Atlanta. Now, here's one thing I will say about the pods account. Every location is different. Some of them work really hard all day long. They hit it really hard. They have the amount of work that they could put someone servicing semis from the very first part of the day. We can literally get there at 6 a.m. or right before 3 p.m. and they will service. Some locations will say if you're not in by 2 o'clock, you don't get served. Some locations will serve you. If you come in right there at 3 p.m., they'll say, okay, let's go ahead and handle it. Some locations will start serving you at 6 a.m. Some locations will say, nope, we got to get our own trucks on the road first, so I need you to clear out of this area, and then you can pull in when we're done and we're ready for you. And they won't serve you before 8 a.m. The location I was going to at 6 a.m., I got up, I think, around 3 something, and I headed out by about 4, if memory serves. Or at least I got up and started the pre-trip process. And I started heading down towards... what was it? Hampton, Virginia, I believe it was. And I arrived at that location early. Now, that location I could not get a hold of by phone. There was 2 phone numbers listed. Neither one of them went to anybody. Both of them were disconnected numbers. So that was a bit annoying. I had no location I could contact the customer, find out. If I can reach the customer and find out that they're not going to serve semis until 7 or until 8, cool. I'll show up there at 7 or 8, even though that means I'll have to deal with rush hour traffic, start my day later, something like that. I'll do that because I understand that otherwise it would be waiting around, and I don't want to do that. So I got up, headed down there, got there just before 6 a.m., and I went ahead and broke the straps on the pods I was dropping off. Now, about 6 a.m., it was just before 6 a.m., and you had to pull to this location and then back into where they were going to do the loading, because some locations you can pull in and U-turn, some locations you pull straight on around, some locations you have to back in because there's no way to get out otherwise. So that location was one that you had to back in, and I got there early, I backed in, no problem. And then the guy that pulled up said, oh, well, our warehouse guy doesn't come in until 8. And I was like, 8 o'clock, so I got to wait around 2 hours? And he said, yeah, we have to get our own trucks out, and that will start happening in the next half an hour or so. And he's like, what are you doing here, dropping off or picking up or both? And I said, no, I'm just dropping off, a couple of pods. And he said, if it's just a drop off, let me see what I can do. So he was very nice, very thankful to this dude. He went ahead and said, okay, I'll go ahead and take them off your truck for you. And I said, cool. And he says, what do you need from me? I said, just a signature and a date. And he says, no problem. So he went ahead and took them off. Their straps were already broken. And by then, I was on the road again by like 6:10. I think it was 6:12 when I finally got done with all my logging on the computer or the tablet and got out of there. And then I was driving down to Chesapeake. Now, driving over Chesapeake is kind of interesting. It's not, I wouldn't say fun, I would say interesting, because there's bridges, there's tunnels, you have to go through this stuff, and there was traffic. There was a collision of some sort and a little bit of road construction. So by the time I got down, now that location was not nearly as organized. Got down there, went to the office, there was a couple of guys in there, and then the forklift guy seemed to be in a bad mood. Maybe it's just his personality, but he was not the nicest of people. I went over to him. He says, yeah, you're going to have to go into the office. I said, yeah, I already talked to them. They told me to come out to the forklift guy, because I already did paperwork with them. I handed in the paperwork, said what I was dropping off, the 1 pod, picking up 4 pods, going up to Richmond. They were like, okay, here's your paper. We went ahead and printed it out for you, so everything is right here. And he signed my form, and I was out. Went to the warehouse guy, and he was just like, yeah, you got to go inside. And I said, I already handled all the paperwork with them, and they said I need to come to the forklift guy. He's like, well, you got to talk to them. I'm like, okay, well, they sent me to you because I'm at the unloading stage. And he's like, I'm like, geez, what a personality, man. So anyway, I was the second guy in line. There was a guy in front of me. He got his paperwork done about the same time as me. They went ahead and pulled him on in, or just pulled up into the cul-de-sac, and they offloaded him. And then for whatever reason, he decided he was going to do all of his strapping right there. I'm like, come on, dude, pull around, then strap up. But I was at the time I was actually looking over my order, looking over my directions, because the tablet was telling me that I needed to head one direction on back roads. The last time I went on back roads, it was going through through Pennsylvania. It was when I was leaving, I think, Cinnaminson, headed up towards Liverpool, New York, and it took me down back roads in Pennsylvania because I guess the tablet determined that was the quickest route. It didn't matter that it was slow, sometimes going as low as 25 miles an hour, sometimes in a school zone, sometimes which dropped down to 15 miles an hour. Start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. It wanted me to go the shortest route, I guess. And I remember getting down this one way and only have driven like 30 miles, 28 miles, I think it was. And it took me over an hour and a half driving on the back roads. And I said, nope, not again. If I do my trip, I'm not going to trust the tablet if there are interstates I can take. Even if that means that I'd be delayed a little bit in rush hour or due to the traffic on the interstate, I'd rather do that than go on back roads, which is also going to have traffic on it and also going to have traffic lights and stuff. So kind of made that determination. Now, at this point, I realized that, I was looking over the directions and stuff like that, trying to figure things out. I also have my tablet over there, which I can connect up to my phone. And it uses Truck Map. Now, Truck Map allows you to see an aerial view, kind of a satellite view of where you're going and stuff like that. And some of the routes are better. Some of the routes are really goofy. And I don't like that if you want to add multiple stops, it's not the easiest program to get a hang of. I probably need to watch a tutorial on YouTube to figure out how to get into it. Because if I try to add more than one location, it says add a stop, but then it just goofs up where I want to go and how. So anyway, I was looking over, and then I look up, and the guy's like in his final stages. I'm like, all right, fine. He's already, strapped up. And then he backed in and out a couple of times. And then he finally got out of there. Then he had to secure his straps again. By then I had moved up there, and I realized that the guy, even though I was in an area of the road that the guy easily could have done some loading and unloading of me, the forklift guy had been sitting there for half an hour almost half an hour doing nothing while this guy secured his straps. Because I went ahead and pulled up where he was, and just in case that's where I was supposed to be. Look over, the guy's on his phone. I'm like, lazy, very lazy, and a bad attitude. So he's not somebody I'd hire. I mean, it's not my place to say regarding the Pods account in this location, but he is not the kind of person I would hire. Now, he went ahead and loaded me up. As soon as it was done, I said, thank you, sir. I'm always very polite. And went ahead and loaded up my straps. Because as soon as he would leave to go get another pod, I'd go ahead and start throwing straps and securing them down. Then I'd get out of the way when he came in with another pod, then secure those down. So that way I'm not wasting my time. I hit the road, went on the interstate and this interstate system and got up there. Did not take the back roads. It said back roads would take me about 90 miles. If I went on the interstate, it would take about 110. I'd rather take 110. That way I'm not risking it going on the back roads that I don't know. Going through Virginia, probably all Virginia. I don't know. Anyway, got up to Richmond. It was off of this Averett building. And I had to find where the office was because there was no office anywhere near the Pods location. I was seeing the Pods all over the place. I looked around, didn't see anything. So I was like, well, there's the building. I tried calling the number and it just rang and then it went straight to voicemail. I looked at the paper and it said text before you get there. And I'm like, look, I'm already here. I'm just going to find a place. I'm not going to text. So I went ahead and went inside the Averett building and asked the first employee I saw, I said, hey, I'm looking for the Pods. And they said, oh yeah, go back through here and there'll be the office back there on the left. Okay, so I went and found the guy, very nice guy. He said, okay, well, we printed out your paperwork, so it's right here. I said, all right, well, I'll go ahead and break the straps. He said, yeah, pull into the box that they had painted in the middle of you have all the docks where the guys come in and they park. And then the parking lot's like this big. And the white spot for us, Pods people, is right in the middle of it. So all these guys that are having to back in from the Averett trucks and stuff like that, they have a reduced space because of the Pods parking space. That's if I'm there. He told me where to go and break the straps. I go ahead and I break the straps, and about that moment, as soon as I'm broken the straps and I get back in the truck, I'm like, okay, well, now would be the time to come out. He comes, walks on out, gets in the forklift. I'm like, pretty good timing. So as soon as he takes my pods and starts loading up the other pods, I start throwing straps and get out of there. There was another guy behind me at that point, so I went ahead and threw the straps, got going, got on the road, and started heading out of there, going straight south. Now, I live in Atlanta. One of our main interstates is 85. So it was kind of cool. Just south of Richmond, Virginia is where 95 branches off and 85 starts. So it's cool to be on the source of 85 and to be able to head down 85 all the way down to Atlanta. Now, as I did my load securement checks and stuff like that, I would glance and see how I was doing time-wise, see if there was going to be any construction or anything like that, any traffic. No, there ended up being a collision. So heading down south, there ended up being a semi that ran off the road. I don't know how it happened because it was just this area where there was a 2-lane, but for whatever reason, the semi was probably just not paying attention, because it does happen, and he just went straight off on the road and his trailer flipped around. So hope he was okay. I mean, as the traffic finally cleared up enough, half an hour, 45 minutes later, and I got past there, I'm looking and I see a guy that looks like a truck driver, wearing the safety vest and that kind of stuff. He's on his phone, so I'm like, I guess he's okay. I mean, his CDL is going to take a hit on this one for driving off the side of the road. He's probably distracted driving. As I'm heading down south, I start looking for a place to go ahead and stop, because I like driving, as I've said many times before, at night. That way I don't have to deal with things that, like as many of these collisions or traffic. I prefer to limit my traffic. So anyway, I'm driving down, and as I get past Raleigh-Durham, and I start looking for a place. It's probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I find a Pilot. One thing that really frustrates me about a lot of these truck stops is that they put angled parking the wrong way. It's almost like they're just going to paint the spots however they feel like they need to. And what I mean by angled parking the wrong way is that if you put regular spots where the road goes in this way and the spots are all in a straight line, you can pull down from either side and back in. Or I mean, you don't want to blindside back if you don't have to, but if you can pull in here and then back in, you're going to be fine. But if you pull in this way, you can see an angled back going this direction, but they don't do that. Instead, they put the angled backing spots, they'll put 2 of them facing this direction when you would expect people to go in this way, but no, they want you to go in this direction where you pull straight in. Now, you may say, all right, so just come in from the other direction. Well, that's all well and good, except that the parking spots are coming in this way. So you could pull in and back on the wrong side if you want, and there's nobody blocking your way, but trying to back in on the same side, it's a little on the difficult side. If you want, if you come in this direction, you only have an option of spaces this way. You only have the option of pulling in forward. So you'd have to come in from the other direction to pull in, but that means blocking off the side of the road. So you're looking across this little driveway at another angled parking spot that goes in the same direction as you. I wish that they would do angled parking, if they're going to, where you're driving in and it's angled the other way. You may say, well, you can drive in from the other side, and that's true. But a lot of the times, you would rather park and back into your left, and there's another guy that's trying to back in. And if it's a wide spot, like if there's a big gap for traffic to go in both directions, you would have to reverse sides in order to back in this direction and back in this direction, in which in this case you have to back all the way across this direction, and then that's angled the wrong way, as opposed to just angling straight back and looking over your left-hand shoulder. So that's the reason why angled parking is facing the wrong direction. All right. So, I mean, basically, the long and the short of it is angled parking could go either direction. And if you pull in this direction, you can only go in. If you pull in, if you come in from this direction, you can pull in if it's facing this direction, and backing in would have to be in from the wrong side. I think I've made my point. So anyway, this particular Pilot had most of the parking spaces that were not reserved in the back, and there was some reserved spots there too, but all the ones that were not reserved were difficult to get to. You had to kind of pull in and then back in at a really wonky angle. Some of them you had to like pull in and then back in on an angle on a blindside back. So hopefully there's nobody there at that point. Otherwise, maybe you're a team driver and the other teammate can back you in there, because it's really annoying, because it was like a little area like this where all the parking spaces were. And in order, you could pull in here, but then you'd have to go this way and then pull straight in, or you'd have to loop all the way back and then you'd have to back in on a curve. That's not a blind side. Curving in to get into the spot. But by then, trucks were coming in this side and jamming this area up, and another truck's right behind you. You can't back out. And so you'd have a guy that would do a loop with his truck and then go into a reserve spot, and there's already another truck right behind him that's blocking up the way. And it's a very tight little area. So he starts to back in, and I'm like, well, I didn't realize he was going to start the backing process. So I gave him like 50 feet, but in a semi, that's not quite enough. So I'm looking, and I try to back up another 10, and he starts to do his back, and he jackknifes all the way to a right angle, and he's trying to go towards me. He starts honking. I'm like, dude, I can't back up. So at this point, I'm like, got my reverse lights on, and I creep back a little bit, and the guy behind me, he looks back in his mirror, because he's not perfectly straight behind me. He's a little bit at an angle, and I'm seeing him, and he's like doing this number, looking at his mirrors, and realizes there's another truck behind him, and I'm like, yeah, so we're all stuck. So this guy's honking at me, sitting on his highway horn, and I'm like, dude, I can't move. And finally the guys behind move, and I'm able to give him 10, 15 more feet. As soon as he backs and gets enough in that spot, I look over, and there's another guy that goes ahead and pulls in there, and there's another guy that's following it behind here. I'm like, look, I will just leave this lot if you let me. But he's jammed up that space. And I'm like, if there's one truck that pulls in this way. If another truck wants to pull in this way, I'll clear out of this guy, and that way I'll just clear and go straight out. So as soon as I go ahead and pull up and block the dude that's trying to pull back out to straighten himself up, and I'm sure that wasn't making him happy. But at this point, I look over at the other guy. I'm like, if you can move in over here, I'll leave. So he pulls up a little bit more, and I pull straight on out. At this point, I'm trying to think, okay, I'm south of Raleigh-Durham. I start looking. I do another look at the pilot app before I pull out of there. And I'm like, all right, there's another truck stop, not very many parking spaces. I'm going to go a little bit more towards that direction. I pull up. It ends up basically being a gas stop with like 20 spaces, and all of them are taken. So I went ahead and just did a low securement check, and I jumped back on the road. At that point, I'm seeing truck stops, for different brands, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and stop at the Schneider OC in Charlotte. We're allowed to stop at the transient parking lot. So I go ahead and do that. I get to the Schneider parking lot around 4 p.m. I guess. I pull in there, and I go ahead and stop. Charlotte is doing some goofy things. They're blocking some of the like, you enter the interstate and you can't get off on that exit, or you can't pull back on the same direction you just left, and you can't pull back on to go north the same direction either. So your only way is to go on back roads. Some of those are no truck routes, and you don't know until you start to drive down it. And then you're like, great. So you just go down some road, and then you're like, I guess maybe I'll try turning left again, because you can't pull over anywhere. There's no truck pull-offs, and there's no parking lots big enough or wide enough for you to pull down. So at some point, I finally pull into like a Walmart or some place that's big enough, and then because it's in the middle of the night, it's like 2 a.m. when I go to leave, I go ahead and find a place. I'm like, look at the local area. I'm like, all right, so I can drive up to the next exit this way. I drive to the next one, and it's blocked also. I'm like, come on, you can't block 2 or 3 exits going both directions. So all I want to do is go south, and you block south both different directions. So at this point, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go north until I happen to see on the south side there's a way for me to go down. Go down another exit, another mile or two. Finally, I'm able to loop off and go back down south. Really poor planning, Charlotte. If you're going to be the typical DOT and you're going to block off an exit, block it off in the same direction. So that way you can't pull, can't pull on north, and you can't pull off on that exit either. That way you at least can go down one exit, as opposed to you can't go north off of multiple exits. That's annoying. Do better planning. Some DOTs, they just don't care. They're just going to go ahead and tear everything down. Anyway, so got going south early in the morning from Charlotte, got to Atlanta, and sat through some traffic, because that's what you do in Atlanta. It was probably about an hour and a half delay, I refueled in Brazelton off of exit 129 on 85. That was kind of interesting. Took about half an hour to do because there was a little bit of a line. I pulled up behind a truck. He pulls straight up. I pull in. I do my fueling, and then the truck in front of me is blocking my way. So I can't even move until he comes out. He gets his drink. He moves up. I do my load securement check at that point and go ahead and get ready to go. And I'm pulling out, and there's a transmodal container truck that has blocked up this entire way because it's so tight you have to make a left turn, but there was an Amazon truck blocking his way, and some other truck, like a Target truck or something like that, that was blocked, that had decided to make his own parking space right in where truck pull off is from the front line at the fuel island. So this intermodal truck was not able to make a left turn around the Amazon truck and missed the Target truck either. So it's like he's trying to figure out, or actually it was a she was trying to go forward and backwards a little bit, to go forward as much as possible and the cut over. Finally, the Amazon truck backed up like 5 feet because this intermodal truck got so close, wasn't able to make it all the way over there, and did this number a couple of times and barely squeaked by, and the Amazon truck pulled back right after the person got by. It's like, well, that was a couple minutes too late. Anyway, at this point, I go ahead and pull forward all the way, swing it left, plenty of room, pull out, and there's more, craziness going on in the parking lot. That's what happens in the truck stop parking lots. You end up having the smaller parking lots that don't have nearly as many spaces. People will make their own spaces wherever they want to and probably block up some people, especially in the areas where you pull out of a spot and you're trying to go someplace and they're going to block you up there. Or a fuel island. People love doing that. In the bigger places, they'll make their own spots wherever they want to also, and you'll have spots back to back, and then people will end up blocking things. And I mean, I haven't run into a situation yet where I've had to bang on a window, say, can you pull up, because I'm trying to leave. And then who knows if they'll actually do it. Some of people I'm probably pretty sure wouldn't. You have to pull up, and they'll probably say, they'll probably give you attitude because they can't move their truck, otherwise it's going to violate their 10-hour shutdown or something. And they'll probably just ignore you because it's easier to do that than it is, and they know you're not going to hit them. So anyway, going forward and backward out of a spot, until you can make a tight enough turn, that's what you got to do, I guess. So anyway, got down to Atlanta, got to where I was going. I did my drop, and then I'm already hoping for a pre-assignment. I don't have a pre-assignment. I do my drop at 10 a.m., and I'm contacting Schneider, and I'm like, come on, send me something. I had already let them know what my ETAs were. They knew. But at the same time, by this point, I was approaching my home time. This is Thursday. So I'm looking at this saying, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and stay in this lot because it's 10 a.m. They don't close until 3, and they're really good about, staying there until 3 to load you up. So I go ahead and pull back around and stop, and I park. And I'm waiting for a load that could come at any time. In the meantime, I call Schneider, and I sit in their drive leader line for an hour and 51 minutes on hold until their system disconnects me. That's annoying. At this point, I'm like, look, I'm not going to call back. So I send messages in, and eventually I get one that says, yeah, we're trying to find a load, trying to work out your home time. And I'm looking at this saying, it's Thursday, my home time's supposed to start. You're supposed to have me back home on Monday. So I give it a little while, and then I call in and say, hey, would it be easier if I go ahead and start my home time now, since I don't have an assignment? I'm not on a pre-assignment. If I started my home time and, parked it today and took my home time Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then I start fresh on Monday, would that be better? And they're like, no, we already have you on the list to do a pre-assignment. And I'm like, okay, but the way I look at it, finally I get someone on the phone. I call back later, and after sitting on hold for about half an hour, I'm lucky, it's only half an hour, someone answers the phone. And he says, no, you're on the assignment. You're on the assignment to get something. I'm like, well, here's the way I look at it. I have to shut down for my 34 after tomorrow. And I need to, and if I get an assignment today, I can start towards wherever that happens to be and hopefully do the drop tomorrow before I shut down for my 34, and then drive back over Sunday, do the drop on Monday, and then I'll be back. And I said, are you going to be able to make that work? He says, yeah, because not all of our loads, all of our runs are very far. Some of them are next state over or two, where they're not very far. Cool. All right. Well, let's see what happens. So I wait and wait and wait. I get nothing until until I'm waiting there for almost 3 hours. The one thing I did learn from talking to the DTL is he says, "Well, why are you?" He calls it drive. He calls it line 4. I'm like, "What is line 4?" He says, "You're in off-duty non-driving." I'm like, "Yes, because I'm waiting for a load." He said, "You shouldn't be. You should be off-duty or in the sleeper." Okay, in training, they told us that if we are not driving, we're paid $10 an hour. They were part of what we learned also in the training was, if you're going to jump off the clock, sleeper berth, off duty, whatever else, and that's fine. You can go and eat or do whatever you're going to, is the examples they gave us. If you're off duty, you're off duty. And you could do that during the day and go get some food or take a shower, do whatever. Well, I don't remember it saying that if you're waiting for, they said if you want to jump off the clock and do something while you're being offloaded or something like that, by all means, here's how to do it. It didn't say you had to. So what I've always done is I've always used that time effectively. I've not just, sitting on hold, and saying, well, I'm working. I've always looked over maps. I've looked over, gotten on the private system and read the manual. I've looked over snow chains and how to do that. Watched videos on how to do that on the Schneider website and looked over their proprietary information on how to do certain things, how to handle certain situations. I've called the OSR group and talked to them and asked them questions that would come up. I've done different things to utilize that time effectively. And here I am finding out that, oh yeah, you shouldn't. You should be off the clock for that. Okay, it's $10 an hour. Schneider's not going to go bankrupt because it's $10 an hour. That's my attitude. Plus, this is detention pay. This is nothing I did wrong. There is nothing I did to deserve being on waiting and not have my tires moving, not have mileage while I'm waiting 5 hours. So because of that, this isn't me waiting for them to offload. This isn't me whatever. This is me waiting for a load. At this point, I could go home if I thought that I, because I was in Atlanta, I could have gone back home. But the way I look at it is, as soon as I left, I was going to be sent a job. So I'm sitting there using my time effectively, looking over the internal, because they'll send you videos and they'll say, this week they want, here's our new driver tutorial or whatever. I'm like, great, another video you got to watch, another thing you have to watch for the company. And you don't always have great signal, so you can't always get the video, and sometimes it will only buffer for 6 seconds, then it'll pause again, and so you have to sit there actively, like, oh, okay, they've said something else. You hit pause, it only loads, and you come back to it a couple minutes later, it still only plays 10, 12 seconds before it pauses again. So you have to just sit there with it on while you're doing something else. And a lot of the times what I would do is I'd watch those videos after I logged off, because I don't want to spend all day on my 14 or sit there and, well, I'm watching the video and there's been 45 minutes to watch a 6-minute video. I don't want to do that. It's annoying. So what I'll do is I'll sit there with the video playing while I'm making food in the air fryer or I'm doing something after I logged off for the day. Now that I don't mind doing. The trip planning I don't mind doing when I have a load. I will do that stuff after hours. Now, I know you're technically supposed to do things like trip planning on the clock, but I don't mind doing that off the clock because I don't want to use my 14 hours a day. If you have 70 hours a week, divide that by 14, that's 5 days. I want to maximize my 14 by doing driving and whatever else. If that means that I'm driving across the country, like when I drove over to Washington, which I really liked that run because I could get a lot of miles down real quickly, I would jump in the truck, I'd drive, and then I'd park it. And that was usually about a 12-hour day because you could drive 11 hours and I don't spend much time, but at some point, in order to get to, you can only drive no more than 8 hours before you have to shut down for 30 minutes or do something else for 30 minutes and then they'll give you the last 3 hours. So you have to drive at least 3 hours and then you can take a break or do whatever you need to, do whatever for 30 minutes to get those last 3 hours. So that's annoying because I don't like stopping for something, but what I'll usually do is I'll use that time effectively and I will go ahead and trip plan and figure out where I want to stop for the day, where's going to be a good place to perhaps fuel up if I don't have a fuel stop. Most of the time Schneider will tell you where your fuel stop should be because I guess it's based on where they get the best prices. So it's not best for your points if you only want to get about 75 gallons of fuel and then refuel up. That way you can get more points towards your multiplier. They don't care about that. They just care about it. So I do it when it says to. That's fine. Benefits, the mile, those kinds of things, those are bonuses as far as I'm concerned. At least we're able to use our bonuses, and the company doesn't have, they get all their, they don't get points. It's our point rewards cards that are used. Company just pays for it. So I see that as a benefit. By now I have shower power anyway, which means I've spent more than 1,000 gallons or bought more than 1,000 gallons of fuel, or at least the company has on my card. So that's good. I at least have shower power. I can take showers whenever I want to. I can take one now and take one again in 3 hours from now if I want. Not that you'd want to, but you could. So, but that's one of the things that to me I find a bit annoying. Most companies understand attention pay, and they will pay you for time that you are waiting for a customer site. I will usually use my time effectively, so that way I'm learning something from the company on the company time. But he comes straight out and says, no, you should be in the sleeper berth, or you should be someplace else. So I should be off the clock while I'm waiting for a load. It's no fault of my own that I don't have a load. I submitted all my ETAs. I did everything I was supposed to when it was supposed to be there. They're trying to work it out to get me back home for my home time. So I'm like, okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You're trying to maybe do some wizardry so that way you can get me back home on Monday. I wait there until almost 3 o'clock before I leave. I have an hour and I think 30 minutes left on my 14-hour clock that day. 14-hour clock will expire even if you log in for 10 minutes and then you log back on at 9 hours into the day. You're still on the 14-hour clock until you're off for 10 hours and it resets. So anyway, I leave that location and there is a collision that delays us for 45 minutes. At this point, I'm like looking at it, I'm like watching my time go down. 1 hour remaining pops up, is coming up on my, and I'm like, come on, let me go. I don't want to end up expiring, and end up, they say that the Schneider drivers, the pumpkin drivers, because most of our trailers are orange. I don't want to end up going pumpkin, like, to use the Cinderella reference, and suddenly end up stopped wherever I have to, at a truck stop or something. I want to be able to make it back to the Schneider OC. Waiting almost 45 minutes before I'm finally clear on Fulton Industrial and can get on the road. Luckily, the interstates were smooth sailing. I'm able to get, with just slowing down a little bit, onto 285. I go around there. I'm not stopped. I pull into the Schneider OC. I park, and I do my post trip, and by then it's warning me of 15-minute warnings and stuff like that. I'm able to pretty much get there, and I'm able to shut down before 14 hours, which is good. Now, here's one thing that I actually have a problem with the FMCSA. If you're a driver, you're stuck on a 14-hour daily clock or a 70-hour weekly clock over 8 days. Driving no more than 11 hours. If you're driving and you have 2 hours left on your clock and all of a sudden there ends up being some sort of a tractor trailer flip over, something like that, and you're stuck in traffic for 3 hours and that violates your clock, that's still on you. To my knowledge, there's nothing you can do to fight that. If a police officer pulls you over and says, let me see your log, and you show it to them, you violated your driving hours, so here's a citation. Up to a $16,000 fine when you were stuck in rush hour traffic unable to move. That's not fair. The reason I mention that as an example is because the following day, as soon as I park, I say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and go home and see my family for the night. I drive home, and as I'm on my drive home, after parking, I get a load. I get all the way to the house, and then I look at the load and say, oh, guess where it happens to be? It's not leaving the next morning from Atlanta and going to maybe Mississippi, someplace that I can do a delivery same day, maybe not same day. I could probably do a delivery and then get, shut down. Like maybe send me over to Nashville. I could get up to Nashville and load and unload and then get most of the way back to Atlanta, or send me farther than Nashville, someplace where I can do a drop off and a pick up, Alabama. Send me to Mobile, where I could get down. I could spend 5 or 6 hours down there getting there, load and unload there before the end of the day, and then shut down for the day, and then take my 34 and drive back on Sunday, do the delivery on Monday, and there's my home time. No, the job they decided to send me on is up to New Jersey again. So I end up saying, great. Get up in the morning, load, get back into the truck. But the thing is, it shows me a code on there that I can't, it says a 16-foot container is what I'm picking up, but it has no container number, has nothing else. It has the code BMT, and I'm like, Well, if it's what they call a green tag, which means that it is a perfect order 16-foot container. It doesn't have a container number on it either, but it says green tag whatever. I'm like, what does this mean? Well, it means you're picking up an empty container and taking it someplace. Well, I don't know what this means, but it does show a length of 16 feet. So I'm like, I call the after hours number, because by the time I get home, that's the only people that are picking up. And they're like, yeah, I'm not familiar with the pods account. So I'd recommend showing up there just in case at that location in Atlanta and trying to pick up something. I'm like, great. So I got to waste my time going by someplace and seeing if there's a load for me. I show up there and he says, no, it says BMT. You're not picking anything up. I have nothing for you. I had by this point already sent the details a message saying, does this mean I'm not picking something up, or is this empty, or what? I don't get that message until I am already left that location, that customer location, first thing in the morning, because I'm in Eastern time zone. My DTLs are in Central, and so they come in even later. And then they have a morning meeting at like 9 a.m. So I drive up north, heading up 10 miles before I get to the Tennessee border on 75 north. All of a sudden, it's a standstill traffic. I turn on the CB radio and I listen to it, and there's apparently, what they say is that a dump truck had fallen over onto a four-wheeler. Don't know how that happens. And then someone comes on the CB radio and says later that a four-wheeler cut off the dump truck that turned his wheel really quickly, and he ended up flipping. I find out later it's on a little bit of a curve, a curve going downhill. So he probably got cut off and he turned the wheel and then flipped over that direction. So anyway, he fell onto a four-wheeler and stopped. So that was complete standstill of 2 lanes of traffic. And so as I'm stuck there, not moving literally for over 2 hours, not moving, even creeping forward, I am looking at my clock, watching my time, because I have a 70, and I know that day I started with 11 hours. And by the time I got the pre-trip done and stuff, got to the Atlanta, luckily I wasn't wasting any time there, and then hit it north. I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, I only have about 3 or 4 hours. I only have like 4.5, 5 hours left. No, it's 5.5 at that point. Hours before I have to pull over someplace to get my last 3 hours of the clock. And I'm hoping to be able to make it to my location in Nashville, or just below Nashville, so that way I can use my half hour of offloading the truck, or not offloading. There is no offloading. Just picking up and securing everything. Use my half hour there. Then I get my last 3 hours. At this point, I realize that I'm stuck in traffic and I'm unable to move. And I start wondering, because there is miles of traffic behind us by the time they finally open back up. And I know this because I'm listening to the CBs of the people coming back the other way, and they're like, yeah, it's right off of this exit. And then I'm hearing right at the end of the range, they're saying, yeah, if you can get off on exit 252 or whatever it was, get off on there. And they're telling drivers to do this. And I'm hearing people respond, okay, copy, I'm going to try to get off on this exit. And I know I already passed that exit. The next exit I come to is, I think, 256. So I'm looking at it saying, okay, well, they're obviously, because 256 wasn't far away. And I look at it and I'm like, those people were probably over 4 miles behind me. But, it's fairly straight there. You're not really in the mountains just yet. So I'm like, all right, the CB range is pretty good. Or at least he's talking to people at the very edge of my range and telling them. So they're trying to get off. But I'm looking at this, and there's been many times I've been on the interstate and looking at things saying, all I have to do is get, I can get there, and I'm inside my last hour of service before I shut down. And that's how I'm able to get almost 650 miles in a day. And I'm looking at this thinking to myself, all it takes is traffic, and a standstill traffic at that, to potentially have me violate my HOS, my hours of service. And I look at that, and that's a reality check to me. So, granted, that doesn't happen very often. But when it does, that can mess things up. And you don't have an excuse to the FMCSA. If you're sitting there and you could even park your truck, turn it off, log off, but that 14 hours clock is still going. There's nothing you can do to stop that clock once you start it. So that to me tells me there's a lot of potential of drivers without having any ability to control it. They could be shut down. They could be out of service and up to a $16,000 fine for something that's out of their control, like a car or a truck getting into a collision or something like that and stopping 2-lane traffic. Go the same way, and there's nowhere to pull off. By the time I got out of there, it was about 2.5 hours. Now, you see people getting off on the interstate and they're talking and everything else. I jumped out and said, well, you know what? I come up on my load securement check, which technically I don't really have to do because I'm empty. But I end up logging in that way because after only about 5 minutes, if you're driving in a standstill, you have to actively hit continue driving. Otherwise, it jumps you off, and it calls it off duty not driving, and it doesn't give you an activity, so you have to find something to put in there. But since I'm stopped at the side of the road, or stopped on the interstate and I have nothing to do, at this point what I do is I jump back here and I grab my booklet, which is literally back here, and I look over for a couple of things I'm trying to find the answers to, and trying to figure things out. And then I look up and realize I'm off duty not driving. I'm like, great, so I have to give it an activity. So I went ahead and called it a load securement check, TIV, tire check. And then I'm looking at it saying, well, crap, I need to at least do those things because I'm stuck. And because it's a standstill traffic, it doesn't take very much. I'll go ahead and say, you know what, let me go ahead and do that. So I jump out, grab my winch bar, go around and start banging on the tires and checking. There's no load to check. But I at least do the tire check and the TIV. And trailer integrity verification. So I go ahead and do that and jump back in the truck. And then it suddenly occurs to me that if I jump back on the drive line and say not driving, then I'm stuck there, still unable to drive. In 5 minutes from now, unless I'm actively looking at the thing as it counts down for 10 seconds on the tablet, or however many seconds it happens to be, I'm going to miss it because I'm looking at the book while I'm sitting there in traffic. If I miss that coming up there, I'm going to have to go into another activity again. So at this point I say, you know what? I'm just going to sit here in that activity. And then it occurs to me after sitting in it for 15 minutes, knowing the company has paid me $1.50 or $2.50 at that point, $10 an hour, it's not going to put Schneider out of business or whatever, even though it's, if the system didn't already put me into not off duty not driving, I would have stayed in driving. But since the tablet automatically does that, I said I got to give it an activity, and then I got to do that activity if there's any way to do it, which I was in standstill traffic, so I could. But I said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and stay in that because the tablet forced this upon me. They say you're the captain of your own ship. Well, that's fine. I'm the captain of my own ship. The ship made a determination of something for me, and it was not by my choice. So I'm going to sit there until I start driving over 5 miles an hour again. As soon as we start moving again, I'll drive over 5 miles an hour. Either way, I'm going to at least have my last 3 hours of the day unlocked to me. That's the way I looked at it. Because if I start driving, all it's going to be is a drive for 20 or 30 seconds, pull up forward again, and then I'm going to be sitting there again. And if I happen to miss after 5 minutes or after 4 minutes, whatever it happens to be, if I miss it, are you still driving, or jump off into an off-duty status or change status? Is what it says. Is are you still driving? Continue driving or change status are your two options. Well, if I have to change status, then I got to give it an assignment or something like that. And every time you change your status with a load, you have to change what you have to say. You have to do your load securement check. I didn't have a load at the time, so I didn't have to do that. I at least have to do something to make it worthwhile. I can't just say trip planning paperwork. I mean, I guess I could because I technically was looking at my booklet. Again, when I'm on the clock, I'm going to use the time effectively and do something that's worthwhile to the company. Increase my knowledge, do something else. I can't make phone calls because as soon as I make a phone call, you're going to be going down the road again, and then you have to jump off the call because the company policy is no phone calls while you're driving. So I go ahead and say I'm not gonna make a phone call because of that. I would have to put my phone back out of airplane mode and whatever. So, at this point, the CB radio says it's starting to clear up traffic-wise, and you can head. And they're like, because of you'll hear that they did update. They finally were able to pick up the truck off the car, and then they say now the truck is hooked, and now the car is hooked. Now they're out of the way. Now what they're doing is cleaning up the dump truck had dropped a whole bunch of trash on the interstates, and now they're picking all that up. We should be moving soon. Then you hear that Now the right lane is open, and so now it's going to start trickling back to us. Then you hear that the right 2 lanes are open, and it's going to start coming back. So as soon as the traffic starts moving, you have to get over, fight your way into those lines, and then I head north, do my drop at the location. They're pretty slow, and I look at this as I'm watching them load up the truck, and I secure things down, and I'm waiting. I'm thinking to myself, I'm just south of Nashville. I could go by the Schneider OC, shut down there for my 34, and that way I could get a chance to meet these people that I'm working with, my DTLs. And I think about that very strongly. And then as I'm thinking about it, I say to myself, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and see how much of this drive I'm going to have like 3 hours left. I'm going to go ahead and see how much of this drive I can get down headed eastbound. So I'm not going to stop at the Schneider OC. And I pass it on the interstate, and as I'm passing, I'm like, yeah, I could stop because I know where it is now because I literally see it. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. As I'm driving, I say, I already told myself I was going to stop at a pilot that was 46 miles away. When I looked at it, I said, well, there's a pilot on my route that's 46 miles away. I'll do my first load securement check there. And so when I pull off there, I look over and their parking lot is completely empty. I also look over and they happen to have a Wendy's built in there. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? A Baconzilla would sound great. I look at my hours and I'm just under 2 hours. And I say, you know what? If I shut down now, it'll be like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That means that when my 34 is done, I can leave at midnight and I can go ahead and drive in the middle of the night. I like doing that. So I say to myself, you know what? If I'm driving 5 days on my after I do my reset, I'll have 70 hours. That's 5 days of 14 hours a day. I'm not going to need all of that time because I'm planning on driving overnight, getting probably 600 miles towards New Jersey. And then I'll wake up early and I'll drive in the last 200 miles. I'll get there. I'll drop off at 6 a.m. and then hopefully I'll have another assignment and be headed back. Hopefully it won't take me past Wednesday to get there to Atlanta, and I can shut down on Wednesday, be down for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then start early on Monday. I hope they don't look at the home time and say, well, your home time ends on Friday. We're going to go ahead and pre-assignment you on Saturday, because no, I get 4 days home. If you're going to have me working for 3.5 weeks, almost, the very least you could do is still give me my 4 hours of home time, or 4 days of home time. So I'm going to see what that is. It doesn't count that that they delayed me a job and I was stuck. I would have been sleeping at the Schneider OC overnight and waiting for a load anyway. So I could sleep in the Schneider OC, or I could spend that few hours I have off and go home and see my family. So I did that. That doesn't count as home time. That was bonus time that I would normally be spent in a truck stop. So anyway, I looked at that and I said, you know what? If I shut down early, I'm not going to use all, because that would be like a day driving 600 miles, a day driving the rest of the way to New Jersey, and then starting my drive home and then shutting it down. And then the next day, I can probably drive, if I'm still early in the morning, I might be able to drive the rest of the way to Atlanta. In which case, I would be able to shut down Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then I'd be shut down on Sunday anyway. But why kill myself? Why not just, if I know that my home time would end on Saturday and they're not going to give me an assignment before Monday, I might as well drive and not try to just push it as quick as possible. Now, for all I know, and this is something I'm going to have to keep an eye on, they could pre-assign me there in New Jersey. And they could tell me to go to Florida. Or they could say, go straight down 95. Or they could say, go and drop off in Virginia again and then head home. In which case it would be delaying me another day. Because I would have to then build in a stop that's during the regular hours and then shut down. I don't know how they're going to do this, but they did not want me to take my home time early when it made sense to, because I was already on the list. So if I'm on the list and they have me down as home time, coming home on Monday, my home time starts Tuesday and ends on Friday, and then I start again on Saturday. If you have me in New Jersey on Monday, there's no way I'm going to get home unless you're expecting me to drive like I normally drive early in the morning, finish my drive in 6 a.m., and then I drive maybe 300 miles until the early afternoon, and then I shut it down, and then I drive the rest of the way to Atlanta on Tuesday, drop off just before, and then I drive the rest of the way over. That is doable. Are they expecting me to use my home time that way? And to say, well, you're arriving back on Tuesday, so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, yeah, you'll get a job on Saturday again, in which case I'd only have 3 days home time, and what's left of the day I get home. No, because I would be working that day. That would be a work day on Tuesday. So that means Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then I would also have to be off on Sunday because PODS doesn't work those hours. So you can't tell me that I get home time starting on a work day. That doesn't count. You send me home, and if I'm driving, if I'm working that day, that's the day I get home. If you're working a regular job Monday through Friday and you get home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you can't say, well, that starts your weekend. You're going to be back Sunday at 3 p.m. and that's going to start, because you get 2 days off. No, that doesn't work that way. You got the rest of that day, which is a work day still. Then you have your 2 days off, your Saturday, Sunday. Well, if I have 4 days off, I get the rest of the day off that I was working, and then I start my clock, and then I start my 4 days off. That's the way it is. I'm waiting to see how Schneider handles the home time, because there is a possibility that if I get a good number of miles tomorrow, because I'm slightly less than 800 miles to get to where I need to be on Monday by 6 a.m., which they do start loading up at 6 a.m. So if I drive tomorrow and I make it a good way through, since I'm going to start around midnight and it's early and it's on a Sunday, there's a very good possibility that I can get 600 miles down the road, and then all I have to do is spend 3 or 4 hours driving the rest of the way down to New Jersey, load up, and then I can get a few hundred miles down, maybe another 300, hopefully. Because if I'm driving 3 hours and I spend 30 minutes at the New Jersey location dropping off this load and picking up another one if I'm on a pre-assignment, that will take me, by breaking the straps, having them load and unload, and then me loading this and strapping back up, that will unlock those last 3 hours to me. So I'll have 7 or 8 hours to drive. I should be able to, at the very least, get 300 miles down the road by then, in a perfect world, as long as the traffic is working in my favor. So hopefully I would be able to get, Atlanta's just under 800 miles from New Jersey. So if I can get 300 miles down, I can do the last 400, drop off, and then I can get home. That'd be nice. Have a little bit extra. By that point you're pretty exhausted, so you end up shutting down, and then I'll doze on the sofa or doze or whatever, take a nap, and then get up and be with my family, and then be on that schedule for 4 days. Anyway, that's my thought process and what's going on in my mind. So we will see how this all handles. Stay tuned, and in the next episode, in the next few days, or next episode if you're watching these delayed, we'll see how it ends up being, what ended up happening, and I'll tell you the tales of my home time.